A rocket company is now worth more than Nvidia, Meta, and every major bank combined. SpaceX hit a $2 trillion valuation this week after its stock jumped 19% on the very first day of trading. $2 trillion. That's not hyperbole. To put it in perspective, SpaceX is now the fifth most valuable company on Earth, right alongside Apple, Microsoft, Saudi Aramco, and Alphabet. For a company that was literally launching bottle rockets from the Texas desert just 2 decades ago, this is absolutely staggering. That 19% first-day jump is historic. Most hot IPOs pop 5 to 10%. 19% means investors open their wallets before the opening bell even finished ringing. The demand was ferocious. Here's what makes this wild. SpaceX isn't a consumer app or software company. You don't use it every day. It builds rockets, industrial spacecraft, the kind of business that normally burns billions for decades before turning profitable. Yet here we are. The valuation makes sense when you see what SpaceX actually does. It launches more rockets than the entire rest of the world combined. Starlink provides satellite internet to over 150 countries. The US military depends on SpaceX for national security launches. NASA uses SpaceX to reach the International Space Station. But here's what most headlines are missing. This tells us something huge about where the world thinks the future lives. And that changes absolutely everything. Elon Musk started SpaceX in 2002 with a wild dream: make space launch cheap enough that anyone could do it. At the time, NASA was spending $1 billion per space shuttle launch. That's per launch. Musk thought that was insane. His first few years were brutal. Falcon 1 blew up on launch 1. It blew up on launch 2, launch 3, and launch 4. Musk's company nearly went bankrupt. Then on launch 5 in 2008, Falcon 1 finally made it to orbit. That same year, the US economy was collapsing and Musk was running on his last dollars. But then something shifted. SpaceX successfully launched Falcon 9 in 2010. Then it landed the first stage booster back on Earth for reuse in 2015. That was the game changer. Before that, every rocket was one-time use. You'd light it up, watch it fly, then it splashed in the ocean as junk. SpaceX made them land themselves. With reusable rockets, launch costs dropped from $10,000 per kilogram to a few hundred. Suddenly space became affordable. Suddenly it became profitable. In 2015, SpaceX deployed Starlink satellites. By 2020, Starlink was providing internet to remote corners of the planet. By 2022, Ukraine was using Starlink to keep its military connected during the Russian invasion. Space wasn't theoretical anymore. It was keeping people alive. Then came the big one, Starship, the fully reusable super heavy lift rocket that Musk designed to eventually take humans to Mars. In 2023, Starship completed its first integrated flight test. In 2024 and 2025, SpaceX kept pushing harder, more flights, more success, more proof that the company could execute. And this is where things get surprising. All that success finally convinced Wall Street this was real. $2 trillion is hard to visualize. Let's break it down. Apple is worth about $3.4 trillion. Microsoft is $3.1 trillion. Saudi Aramco is around $2.2 trillion. SpaceX just entered that tier on day one. For context, $1 trillion is a million. If you spent $1 per second, it would take you 32,000 years to spend $1 trillion. SpaceX just got valued at twice that. What drives that valuation? Investors are pricing in Starlink's future. Right now, Starlink has about 11 million active subscribers globally. The market for global satellite internet is estimated at hundreds of billions of dollars. Starlink could eventually capture a massive chunk of that. They're also pricing in SpaceX's monopoly on heavy lift launch. SpaceX has roughly 50% of the global commercial launch market. Its competitors like Blue Origin are still years away from offering comparable service. That means SpaceX gets to set prices while supply is constrained. There's also the military and government contracts. The US Space Force, US Space Command, National Reconnaissance Office, they all depend on SpaceX now. That's stable, recurring revenue, not flashy but incredibly valuable. And then there's Starship. If Starship works as designed, the cost per kilogram to space could drop another 10 to 20 times lower. That opens up entire markets that don't exist yet: space construction, space manufacturing, moon bases. Investors are pricing in a version of the future where SpaceX is to space what Tesla became to electric vehicles. The 19% first-day pop suggests investors think even $2 trillion is a bargain. And that's the kicker. They're betting on technology we haven't even built yet. Let's talk real business. SpaceX isn't just theory or future promises. It's launching rockets right now every week to orbit. First, commercial satellite launches. Companies need to put satellites in orbit for communications, Earth observation, weather monitoring. SpaceX's Falcon 9 is the cheapest, most reliable option on the market. At around $67 million per launch, it's undercut its competition by 2 to 3 times. Blue Origin, United Launch Alliance, Arianespace, none of them can touch those prices. SpaceX launches roughly 25 times per year and could do more. Second, Starlink. SpaceX has already launched around 5,000 Starlink satellites into orbit. There are eventually going to be tens of thousands. Right now, Starlink serves remote communities, maritime ships, airplanes, and developing nations where ground-based internet doesn't exist. In Ukraine, it kept the military connected when conventional infrastructure was destroyed. That's real impact. That's real money. Monthly subscriptions run between $100 and $200 depending on speed and location. Third, crew and cargo to the International Space Station. NASA hired SpaceX to ferry astronauts and supplies to the ISS. That's recurring government revenue, reliable and predictable. Fourth, national security. The U.S. Space Force and Space Command use SpaceX exclusively for military payloads. National Reconnaissance Office launches. That's classified revenue, but it's substantial. Fifth, Starship development. SpaceX is perfecting a fully reusable super heavy lift vehicle. If it works, it transforms everything: lunar landers, Mars missions, space stations. Every aerospace company on the planet is watching. None of this is vaporware. These are rockets flying today. Contracts delivering today, revenue happening today. But the real money investors are betting on comes next. SpaceX didn't just get lucky. It systematically out-executed every competitor on the planet. Blue Origin, founded by Jeff Bezos in 2000, actually predates SpaceX, but Blue Origin moved slowly. It spent decades developing New Shepard, a suborbital tourism vehicle, that finally flew in 2021, 21 years after founding. Meanwhile, SpaceX was landing boosters and launching satellites. Blue Origin's New Glenn heavy lift vehicle is still in development. It's not flying yet. When it eventually does fly, it will compete with SpaceX's Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, but Falcon 9 already has 500 successful launches. SpaceX has operational pricing. Blue Origin is still writing engineering plans. Then there's United Launch Alliance, the traditional aerospace giant. ULA is good at what it does, reliable, proven. Government trusted, but reliable means expensive. A ULA Atlas V launch costs $300 to $400 million. A Falcon 9 launch is $67 million. You get 3 to 4 times the performance for 1/5 the price. From a procurement standpoint, SpaceX is objectively better. Europe's Arianespace is in the same situation. Ariane 6 is a capable rocket, but it costs nearly $300 million per launch. Again, SpaceX is 10 times cheaper. What's SpaceX's secret? Vertical integration. SpaceX manufactures nearly everything in-house instead of buying from suppliers. Engines, avionics, structures, it all comes from SpaceX. That cuts supply chain friction and costs dramatically. And reusability. Landing boosters and flying them again is hard. Musk's engineers solved it. When you don't throw away a 30-story building made of aerospace-grade aluminum after every use, your costs collapse. Every other company is now trying to copy that model. They are 5 to 10 years behind. Now here's where the real story starts. This competitive dominance is worth something real to investors. SpaceX's $2 trillion valuation signals something profound. Space is becoming a mainstream industry, not a government monopoly, not a distant future. Mainstream, now, that changes everything about innovation acceleration. When a market is worth $1 trillion, brilliant engineers leave their comfortable jobs and start companies. Venture capital floods in. Competition intensifies. You get exponential improvement year over year. Look at smartphones. In 2007, the iPhone seemed impossible. By 2015, every phone could do things that would have seemed like magic a decade earlier. That's what happens when capital recognizes a massive market. SpaceX's valuation tells investors this is the generation's smartphone moment for space. It's happening now. Jump in. You'll see thousands of companies building satellite constellations, space stations, lunar landers, in-space manufacturing, asteroid mining equipment, space-based solar power. Most will fail. A few will become worth hundreds of billions. That's how innovation works. There's also a geopolitical angle. The United States is now clearly dominant in commercial space. China is spending billions trying to match SpaceX's capabilities. Russia's space program is deteriorating. Europe is expensive and slow. India is capable but can't match prices. The US, via SpaceX, owns the future of space launch. That matters because space is becoming critical infrastructure. Starlink is keeping Ukraine's military connected. GPS from space powers every financial transaction on Earth. Whether satellites from space predict hurricanes, communications satellites from space keep ships and planes alive. In the next decade, power grids and military systems will depend on space-based networks. Dominance in space becomes dominance in everything. That's why the US government was so eager to have SpaceX go public. It keeps the company funded and competitive. It ensures American dominance for decades. But here's what the headlines aren't telling you. This is just the beginning. If you're an investor, SpaceX's public status opens doors. You can now buy shares of a space company directly. Before this, space investing meant buying Boeing or Lockheed Martin or Axiom, which are all very different businesses with heavy defense exposure. Now you can own pure-play space exposure. If you're interested in spaceflight, this matters because SpaceX will accelerate innovation. More capital means faster development. Starship will probably fly humans to orbit by late 2026 or 2027. That's ahead of Blue Origin's New Shepard plans. That's ahead of Boeing's Starliner schedule. SpaceX will win the human spaceflight race. If you work in tech, watch this closely. SpaceX's success proved that vertical integration works, that manufacturing in-house is competitive, that solving hard engineering problems beats incremental improvements. That's going to shape how the next generation of tech companies operate. If you care about internet access, Starlink's satellite constellation is going to reach billions of people who'll never get fiber optics. Remote towns in Africa, rural communities in India, maritime shipping in the Pacific, Starlink is going to wire up the whole world. That changes everything for education, commerce, and emergency services. The metric to watch is launch cadence. SpaceX currently does about 25 commercial Falcon 9 launches per year. Within 2 years, that number should double. More launches means more revenue and more proof that this company is executing. Watch Starship progress. Every successful integrated flight test is a billion-dollar proof point. Watch Starlink subscriber growth. When Blue Origin finally launches New Glenn, that's when you'll know if SpaceX's dominance can truly be challenged. SpaceX's $2 trillion valuation is a milestone, but it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning. This tells us the future is in hard things, in manufacturing, in solving physics problems, in building stuff that actually works at scale, not in another app, not in software that's a copy of a copy. Real engineering, real innovation, real rockets. It tells us that the venture capital and innovation that once flowed entirely to Silicon Valley is now flowing to aerospace, to robotics, to energy, to materials science. That's healthy for humanity. That's how you solve climate change. That's how you create abundance. It tells us space is now inevitable, not something NASA does, not something governments debate. It's inevitable, commercial, growing, open to entrepreneurs. Where does SpaceX go from here? Starship takes humans to Mars. Starlink becomes the global internet backbone. Its valuation could double in the next decade if execution holds. Will it? That depends on results. But after watching SpaceX land boosters, scale Starlink to 11 million subscribers, and prove reusability works, execution is exactly what this company does. The message for you: the next trillion-dollar company will be built by someone solving a hard engineering problem. It could be space, energy, or biotech, but it'll be solving something real, not chasing social media trends. SpaceX went from near bankruptcy in 2008 to $2 trillion in 18 years. More opportunities like that are coming if you know where to look. Follow for daily coverage of the breakthroughs that matter.